Technologies, robotics, genetic engineering, and nanotechnology, are threatening to make humans an endangered species. Now here's the thing. That was not written by a science fiction author. It was written in the year 2000 by one of the most respected technology insiders in the world, Bill Joy, co-founder of Sun Microsystems and one of the builders of the digital age. Today, we are going to sit with his question. Not necessarily to agree with it, but to take it seriously. In science, technology, and society, we often ask how technology affects human life. But in this lecture, the question becomes sharper and more unsettling. What happens when technology does not merely assist us, but gradually makes us unnecessary? That is the challenge of this topic. Not fear for the sake of fear, but reflection. Because before we can talk about progress, we have to ask a deeper question: progress for whom, and at what cost?
Before we discuss his argument, we need to understand why Bill Joy matters. Bill Joy was not an outsider attacking technology from a distance. He was one of its architects. He co-founded Sun Microsystems in 1982. He helped create BSD Unix, contributed to the foundations of Internet computing, and built tools like the VI editor that are still used today. So when a person like that says the future may not need us, people pay attention. What made his essay so powerful was precisely this tension. He was not anti-technology. He was a builder warning the world about the possible consequences of the very systems he helped bring into existence. That gives his essay unusual credibility. It is one thing for a critic to be afraid of technology. It is another thing when the fear comes from someone who deeply understands how technological progress actually works. This is why his 2000 essay became one of the most discussed documents in technology ethics. It forced people to confront a disturbing possibility, that the greatest danger may come not from ignorance, but from innovation without restraint. Bill Joy organized his warning around three converging technologies. He called them GNR: genetics, nanotechnology, and robotics. First, genetics. This is the ability to alter living organisms, including humans. The fear here is not just designer babies. The deeper concern is self-replicating biological agents, engineered pathogens that could spread beyond human control. Second, nanotechnology. This refers to engineering at the molecular scale. Joy worried about self-replicating nanomachines, sometimes described in theory as the gray goose scenario, where tiny machines multiply uncontrollably and consume matter to build more of themselves. Third, robotics. This is the pathway that connects to artificial intelligence and autonomous systems. Joy's fear was not necessarily violent robot rebellion. It was something quieter: machines that outthink us, outperform us, and eventually no longer need us. What ties these three together is a crucial point. Unlike many older technologies, they are potentially self-replicating, distributed, and increasingly accessible. That means they are much harder to contain than traditional threats. For Joy, this combination was historically new. And because it was new, it demanded a new level of ethical seriousness. One of the strongest triggers for Bill Joy's concern came from reading the futurist Ray Kurzweil. Kurzweil believed that artificial intelligence would eventually surpass human intelligence. He called this the singularity. In his view, that future was exciting. Humans would merge with machines, transcend biology, and overcome many of the limits that define ordinary human existence. But Joy read the same prediction and saw something entirely different. He asked a simple but unsettling question: if machines become smarter than us, can improve themselves, and can operate without our help, then what exactly do they need us for? That is the core of the robot takeover argument, not necessarily a violent takeover, not a Hollywood war, something more mundane and, in some ways, more frightening: obsolescence. Joy used the analogy of the horse after the automobile. Horses were not attacked, they were not hated. They simply became less necessary in the economic and social system. His concern was that humans might one day face the same fate. A future that works very efficiently, but no longer depends on us in any meaningful way. That is why this slide matters. It reframes the fear. The threat is not always destruction. Sometimes the deeper threat is irrelevance. This is one of the most important ideas in Joy's essay. Previous dangerous technologies, like bombs or chemical weapons, were dangerous because of the physical objects themselves. In principle, You could limit them by controlling materials, destroying stockpiles, or inspecting facilities. But GNR technologies are different. The danger is not only in the final product. It is in the knowledge of how to create it. Once that knowledge exists, it cannot simply be erased. That is why Joy said the genie of knowledge cannot be put back in the bottle. Think about what that means. A person can learn how to modify genes, build advanced autonomous software, or design powerful nanoscale systems. Even if one laboratory closes, the knowledge remains. It spreads through training, publications, networks, and digital exchange. This creates a serious governance problem. You can inspect a missile. You cannot inspect an idea in someone's mind. So what this really means is that technological danger in the 21st century becomes harder to regulate than before. Not because governments do not care, but because the nature of the threat has changed. That is why Joy's argument is not just about machines or labs. It is about the relationship between knowledge, power, and responsibility in a world where discovery moves faster than regulation. Now let's bring the discussion down from existential risk to something very familiar. Most of us know Waze or Google Maps. These apps help us move through traffic, avoid congestion, and find the quickest route. On the surface, they are extremely useful, but they also illustrate a smaller version of Joy's concern. When people repeatedly rely on navigation apps, they begin to surrender part of their own spatial judgment. Over time, many users become less confident navigating without the system. The technology does not just help them. It slowly replaces a human function. There is also a social dimension. Waze optimizes routes for individual drivers, but that optimization can flood quiet neighborhoods with traffic. Residents who never consented to the system end up carrying its burdens. This is where STS becomes very important. A technology may be efficient, but efficiency alone is not enough. We must ask, who benefits, who pays the cost, and who gets to decide. Waze is not an existential threat, but it is a concrete illustration of a larger pattern. Each time we outsource memory, navigation, judgment, or decision-making to technology, we gain convenience while potentially losing agency. And when that pattern scales across society, it becomes more than a personal habit. It becomes a civilizational shift. At this point, we move from technological analysis into philosophical reflection. Martin Heidegger warned that modern technology does not simply give us tools, it changes the way we see the world. He called this enframing, which means seeing everything as a resource to be optimized, measured, and controlled. If that logic is applied to nature, rivers become energy sources and forests become timber reserves. But if that same logic is applied to people, human beings themselves risk being treated as units of productivity. That is where Joy's concern becomes deeply human. If machines can work faster, think faster, and operate more efficiently, what remains uniquely human? This slide raises three essential questions. First, what is uniquely human? Is it consciousness, moral judgment, love, meaning, or responsibility? Second, what do we owe future generations? If our technological choices today shape the conditions of their lives, then surely we carry an obligation beyond our own moment. Third, is progress always good? Or is progress only meaningful when it actually supports human flourishing? These are not side questions. They are the central questions of STS, because the real issue is never just what technology can do. The real issue is what kind of human future it is helping to build. Now let's localize the discussion. Bill Joy's warning was global, but all real governance must eventually become local. So what has the Philippines done to protect people from technological risk? There are two major laws often discussed in this context. The first is the Cybercrime Prevention Act of 2012, which addresses digital offenses such as illegal access, identity theft, and other technology-enabled crimes. The second is the Data Privacy Act of 2012, which established the rights of Filipinos over their personal information and created the National Privacy Commission. These are important steps. They show that the Philippine state can respond to technological harms through legislation. But there is also a major gap. These laws are mostly reactive. They address technologies that were already visible and widespread. When it comes to artificial intelligence, nanotechnology, synthetic biology, and autonomous systems, the Philippines still lacks a comprehensive national framework. That means we are entering emerging technological territory without strong guardrails. So the question for our generation is this: do we wait until these technologies are already deeply embedded before regulating them, or do we try to govern them before the risks become unmanageable? That is not just a policy question, it is a moral and civic question. A good lecture should not present only one side, and Bill Joy's argument is no exception. Many respected thinkers share his concern. Stephen Hawking warned that advanced artificial intelligence could become the last major invention humanity ever needs to make. Nick Bostrom argued that superintelligent systems may pose catastrophic risks if their goals diverge from ours. Elon Musk has repeatedly described AI as one of humanity's greatest dangers, but there is also strong pushback. Ray Kurzweil believes these technologies will extend and empower humanity, not destroy it. Steven Pinker argues that throughout history, technological progress has generally improved human welfare and reduced suffering. In that view, catastrophist thinking often overestimates danger and underestimates adaptation. There is also a practical argument: even if one country chooses restraint, others may not. So some argue that the question is not whether the technology will be developed, but by whom and under what values. That is why the debate remains unresolved. And that unresolved tension is exactly why this topic belongs in STS. We are not here to memorize a final answer. We are here to learn how to think responsibly in the middle of deep uncertainty. So is Joy right? Maybe partly, maybe profoundly, maybe not entirely. But his warning remains powerful because the risks he identified have not disappeared. In many ways, they have become more real. At this point, the lecture becomes personal. Rather than only analyzing Bill Joy's argument, this activity asks you to imagine a future shaped by the very technologies we have discussed. You will choose one of four scenarios set in the year 2075. The first is a world where robots and AI have taken over most jobs, and humans no longer need to work. The second is a world where genetic engineering is routine, disease is nearly eliminated, and designer babies are normal. The third is a world where nanotechnology can repair physical damage and extend life to 200 years. The fourth is a world where an AI more intelligent than all humans combined now manages climate, economy, and governance. Your task is not to predict the future with certainty. Your task is to think ethically and imaginatively. What would life mean in that world? Would the future still need us? Would you choose to live there? And what decision made today might prevent the worst outcome? This matters because imagination is not separate from ethics. The futures we fear and the futures we desire reveal what we value in the present. And once we know what we value, we can begin to ask what kind of future is worth building. Bill Joy did not end his essay in total despair. He proposed a difficult idea called relinquishment. Relinquishment means choosing not to develop certain technological capabilities, even if we can. It is the recognition that capability does not automatically create moral permission. This is not simple technophobia. It is an ethical claim. Just because something is possible does not mean it should be pursued. We already see versions of this in history. Chemical and biological weapons treaties exist because some technologies are judged too dangerous. There have been moments in science when researchers voluntarily paused work until safety standards could catch up. But relinquishment is not easy. Who decides what is too dangerous? Who enforces restraint when nations compete? How do you stop the spread of knowledge once it exists? And what happens if one society pauses while another accelerates? So yes, Joy's proposal is difficult. But the deeper value of relinquishment is that it forces us to confront a basic truth. Progress requires judgment. The first step, as Joy argued, is to acknowledge the danger honestly. That is what responsible hope looks like. Not blind optimism, and not helpless fear, but a willingness to think ethically before the consequences become irreversible. We began with the question, why might the future not need us? Let us end by turning that question around. What would it take for the future to need us? My answer is this: moral seriousness, democratic responsibility, and the refusal to let efficiency become the highest value in human life. Technology does not determine the future by itself, people do. Through design choices, laws, habits, institutions, values, and public action. That leads to three final takeaways. First, GNR technologies carry real risks, and those risks require governance. Serious governance, not just celebration of innovation. Second, human identity, dignity, and purpose must be actively defended in the systems we create. If we do not defend them, optimization may quietly push them aside. Third, the answer to Joy's fear is not despair. It is engagement, ethical, informed, democratic engagement. That is why this topic matters, and that is why this course matters. The future is not just something that happens to us. It is something we shape, decision by decision, value by value. And perhaps that is the strongest answer to Bill Joy's warning. The future needs us, precisely because we are the ones responsible for asking what kind of future is worth having.